Diddy was on the phone with them lawyers like, do something, John! So I just finished watching part 1 of the 4-part docuseries that 50 Cent produced about Diddy that just dropped on Netflix today. And when I say this doc is good, baby, I mean it is good. Part 1 starts all the way in early childhood and ends with the unaliving of Biggie, which lets you know that they are moving this story along very quickly. It's coming from a psychoanalytic perspective, meaning they are tracing his present day experiences back to his early childhood experiences. Now, within the first 3 minutes of the doc, I was hooked because it starts out in 2024 with him in his hotel room in New York City on the phone with his lawyers telling them to do something, John, because he knows that an indictment is coming. He can feel it happening. And not only can he feel it happening, but he knows the feds are watching, so much so that they show him on the balcony of his hotel. He looks across the street and there are feds on top of the roof across the street watching him. This is the first 3 minutes of the doc, y'all. It's like, oh, this is real. This is behind the scenes, real life in action footage. And that hooks you in. Then they start talking about his early childhood and how he always wanted fame because his mom always had him around famous people. She would throw these big parties and have him around celebrities. And he wanted fame really, really bad. They also allege that his mom was very abusive toward him. They talk about how she used to beat him really bad. People would see it but wouldn't intervene. So I ain't gonna front. In the very beginning, it kind of feels like they're calling the viewer to have some type of empathy for him, but then they immediately start holding him accountable for some of his egregious actions, even at a young age, including talking about the Howard Party, the infamous Howard Party that he threw that led to a stampede, that led to the unaliving of quite a few young people. So they start talking about that and hold him accountable for his part in that. They also talk about him interning for Andre Harrell and show that whole journey and process leading up to Andre Harrell firing him. He starts working closely with Clive Davis, who helps him cover up the Howard event, teaches him how to open up an LLC, which eventually became his record label. He signs Biggie. The whole East Coast, West Coast beef pops off. It leads to Tupac being unalive, and then boom, part 1 ends. But that ain't it, because in the midst of telling these stories, they are also talking about his relationship to women. They have one of his alleged victims in the doc. Her name is Joy, and I have to say alleged because her case is still pending. But she starts talking about how she was essayed by him. It's all on tape, and she's sharing her story. They also get into his relationship with Kim Porter and Misa, who is the mother of his first child, Justin. Now, what's interesting about this is that one of his friends, his early childhood friends, is in the doc talking about how he witnessed Diddy abuse Misa, and he didn't intervene. And not only that, but he also was at the christening of their son and is their son's godfather. Like I said, y'all, this doc is really good. They are doing a good job at keeping the story going at a nice, fast pace, giving you a lot of detail, characterizing him from a business perspective, early childhood perspective, but also letting us know why he got the case going and holding him accountable for the abuse and things like that. It doesn't feel like they're trying to make him seem like the victim. They are really telling a full, well-rounded story here. Baby, it's good. So who sent the zip payment, Sean, huh? Who sent it? So I just finished watching all 4 parts of the Sean Combs The Reckoning documentary that 50 Cent produced about Diddy. And baby, there are so many spiritual lessons and messages in here. More specifically, we have to talk about the destiny swapping and that Scorpio energy that Diddy was leading in. And let me give grace to my Scorpios because I love y'all. But we gonna get into y'all. Now, Scorpios, hear me out. Diddy was born on November 4th, which makes him a smack dab in the middle, true and through. It ain't on him, it's in him, Scorpio, okay? Now, Scorpio is ruled by the planet of Pluto, and Pluto is our generational planet of power, transformation, and major systems like the government. Oh, okay. Now, the thing about this documentary is that in part one, they talked about how from a very young age, Diddy always had the desire to be famous because he was surrounded by pimps and NBA stars and all of that because of the parties and stuff that his mom threw. He always saw people in the limelight. His father was a hustler, well known Harlem gangster, and he wanted that type of infamy, fame, respect, all of that. Now, in part one, which I already discussed, they make it seem as though a lot of his experiences in adulthood is attributed to his early childhood trauma. I think we have to acknowledge that his drive for power, his desire to be in a leadership position, even having fame, is truly a Scorpio trait. Oftentimes, Scorpios love being in powerful positions. They love being seen as people with power, but this can be used for wellness when it is raised right and evolved in healing and wellness, right? So that desire for power and leadership can actually be a good thing for Scorpios because it makes them relentless when it comes to pursuing their goals. It's important to realize that the ancient ruler of Scorpio is Mars, which is our planet of action. So having those two energies of power and action makes Scorpios naturally very goal oriented. However, when they are unevolved or grow up in childhood trauma, it can make them competitive and it can make them relentless to the point that they are willing to do anything to gain power. And when they get that power, they are willing to do anything to keep it. And that's what we find out about him in this doc. Parts 2 through 4 focus heavily on showing us how far Diddy was willing to go to get power and elevate in power, even within his own organization or record label. It starts out with talking about Biggie and Tupac and the whole East Coast, West Coast beef. They also go as far as proving that Diddy organized the unaliving of both Tupac and Biggie. They proved it via a zip payment that he paid to a party who organized the whole unaliving of Tupac, as well as what really shocked me was the 911 call where the guy is trying to tell them how to drive Biggie to the hospital, and clearly the driver is intentionally going the wrong way because the guy's like, man, what are you doing? What are you doing? Go that way. It seems as though they were intentionally going in the opposite direction of the hospital. That whole thing was crazy, but I want to focus more heavily on the fact that he was energy harvesting from Biggie and other people on his record label. See, the thing is, Diddy knew that he wanted the fame. He wanted not just the fortune, not just the money. He wanted to be front and center, and he wanted the position of power, to be seen as the person who was running everything, but also seen as the most talented person on the label. So he would harvest the energy of Biggie and other artists on the label by getting them to write for him, create for him, and he wanted to be the face of their talents. That is energy harvesting. And although we often normalize ghostwriters and we normalize people like writing songs for others, which is okay, I think it's about the intent that makes it energy harvesting. His intent was to attract or get the fame that Biggie was getting and that other artists on his label was getting. He wanted the fame and the love from the women that Mace got. He wanted the fame and the love from the women that Biggie got. This is proven so much so that every woman that Diddy dated belonged to another man. It seems as though everything that another man had around him, he wanted. And he was willing to take their attributes, like their talents, like their style, their swag, in order to get it. It was quite weird. And for those of you who do not know what destiny swapping is, let me explain it to you. Essentially, destiny swapping starts when someone feels like they are living the wrong life or not receiving the blessings and the fate that they think they should. What they often do is they will align themselves with a person who they believe is living the life that they think they should live. They see this person manifesting the goals that are their goals. They see this person receiving the attention that they think they should receive. And how they destiny swap is they often will start getting close to that person with the intent to harvest some of their energy. Now, what does energy harvesting look like? It can look like somebody starting to dress like you, starting to talk like you, starting to try to perform some of your gifts and talents. And it usually really looks like them setting goals that sound very much like your goals. All of a sudden, your stories become their stories, your desire become their desires. That is energy harvesting. They are trying to manifest your destiny. Destiny swapping usually doesn't end with somebody being unalived, but it can. And it usually gets to that point when you stop putting yourself in position to have your energy harvested. See, the problem here is that, again, that Scorpio energy that Diddy has, where he is naturally drawn to power and desires power, because he is an unevolved and unhealed, and in fact, a traumatized Scorpio, he was willing to do anything to manifest that destiny. And he didn't have the natural gifts and talents that people like Biggie and other artists on his label had. So he got close to them, harvested their energy by harvesting their talents and their gifts. And when he realized that he was about to lose his energy source, he did what he had to do to end the energy source forever. And when we really go deep into the unaliving of both Biggie and Tupac, it really proves to us how far he was willing to go to get that power and that fame that they had. And in the spiritual world, we would consider this destiny swapping, right? He wanted their destiny. He wanted their fate. It was inevitable for Biggie to be a superstar as he was when he was living. It was inevitable for him to have the fame, the fortune, and the love of the women. He had Faith Evans. He had Little Kim. He had some of the most beautiful women in the industry, right? And I think that Diddy wanted that. He wanted that energy. He wanted that fate. And when he realized that no matter how much he harvested Biggie's energy, it was inevitable for Biggie to be the superstar and powerful being that he was. And I also feel like when he realized that Biggie was seeing him for who he was and was about to remove his energy from him, that's when he decided that he needed to do what he had to do in order to remain in the powerful position and remain the best one. The problem with the unevolved Scorpio is that oftentimes they can be so relentlessly competitive that they don't even realize that they are competing. They are harvesting energy from people around them, and they are willing to do whatever it takes to get that energy. And when somebody chooses to not participate in the game, sometimes unevolved Scorpios like Diddy, who have been through a lot of trauma like Diddy, and who have been taught unhealthy ways to cope with that trauma like he was in childhood from those gangsters around him, they take that gangster route in order to end the game permanently. And I honestly think that's what he did with both Biggie and Tupac. He chose to end the game. See, there's a difference between being God body and having a God complex. And as I was watching parts 3 and 4 of Sean Combs' The Reckoning, which is the documentary on Diddy that is produced by 50 Cent, I quickly realized that Diddy has crossed that line from being God body into having a God complex. Let's talk about it. See, Diddy is a product of the 90s. He rose to stardom in the 90s. And in the 90s, especially in New York, there was a popular group called the Nation of Gods and Earths, most commonly known as the 5% Nation. You heard a lot about them from groups like Wu-Tang, people like Erykah Badu, who talked about being born underwater with $3 and 6 dimes, which is an ode to supreme mathematics. She also talked about, you know, the whole 120 and the plus degree, but you can't keep your man up off of me. The 120 plus degree is an ode to the 5% Nation and knowing your 120. The term God body came from the Nation of Gods and Earths. It came from the 5%ers. And to be a God body being means to understand your divine identity, your divine rights, and knowing who you are, also known as having knowledge of self, connecting with the divine God energy within, understanding that if we were made in God's image, call us by our name, which Badu also said, right? Understanding that you have a piece of God within you. We are all spirit beings having a human experience. That God energy dwells within you. That is what it means to be God body. And that's only a pinch of it. The other part of being a God body being that a lot of people, especially folks like Diddy, don't seem to understand is that you have to do some ego work, because being God body within self means that you also recognize the God within other beings and you respect the God energy within other beings. It's understanding that that we are all products of one infinite divine source, that all of us have a piece of God energy within us. And because I respect the God within me, I also respect and recognize the God within you. That's what it looks like to be a fully balanced God body being. And once you start lacking compassion for others and you stop respecting the God energy within other beings, you cross that line into having a God complex where you think you are the only one. Therefore, you try to dominate others. You try to flex your muscles. It gives very much dictator energy. It gives very much evil. And I feel like Diddy had crossed that line. Now, if we're being honest here from a spiritual perspective, Diddy is a reflection of what it looks like to be both God body and then have that God complex. If you look at some of the benefits of being God body, which looks like the confidence that comes from having knowledge of self, knowing who you are, the fact that you know your worth, right? And you're not settling for anything less than what you deserve. Also, being a master manifester, which really is a product of the first two. All of those are benefits of being God body. And Diddy definitely embodied that. He embodied that confidence. He embodied that knowing your worth, right? He embodied that ability to be a master manifester. But that God complex is where his lows was, because he couldn't control that ego, because he lacked that compassion, because he stopped seeing and respecting the God energy in other beings. He became an energy harvester. He became a person that sucked and fed on the energy of other beings. I would say pause, but in this case, no pause necessary, okay? In this case. But seriously, though, he really fed off the life force and the energy of other beings. And that is the God complex. You intentionally hurt and harm and impede upon other people's wellness when you have a God complex. The God complex comes from ego. Being God body comes from spirit. And the saddest part is that most people who start out God body but cross that line into having a God complex aren't even aware that they are doing it. And it's simply because they convince themselves that their ego is spirit speaking to them. It reminds me of that scene in the documentary where Diddy keeps saying that God told him to do nothing, but then turns around and say, but God didn't say that Justin, speaking of his eldest son, God didn't say Justin can't do nothing. God didn't say the lawyer shouldn't do something. So y'all need to do something. Y'all need to use y'all brains to get me out of this situation. That was God complex energy. He convinced himself that his God complex ego was speaking to him and was actually the voice of God telling him to do nothing. The ego is not God, but he couldn't tell the difference between the two. I think one of the biggest spiritual lessons in the Sean Combs The Reckoning documentary is to mind your ego. It's to understand that you can have knowledge of self. You can be God body. You can have confidence and know who you are and be a master manifester. But everything you have within you, you need to have the ability to see and respect that in other beings. If I don't hurt myself, why would I hurt my brother or my sister? If I love myself, I should love my brother or my sister. And when you truly recognize the God within and the God in others, that is when you are living in divine alignment and you are living in God consciousness, or as the Christians would say, in Christ consciousness.